Hi there, Andre Bernier here. Today we're going to be talking about EP9 from the Nord Piano Library. This is the Stockholm Rhodes. So this is the newest electric piano that they've actually released, and it's one I'm a huge fan of. When it first came out, I immediately knew it would replace the other two Rhodes pianos that I really tend to use most in the Nord lineup. Before this EP came out, I tended to favor these two other Rhodes for live performance in an order that might surprise you. I used the EP2 the most, and then followed by that, of course, the EP8, the Nefertiti Rhodes, which up until this point has sort of been the standard for the Rhodes from the Nord Piano Library, and I think the Stockholm is going to replace it, or maybe it already has replaced it. I just saw a poll on a forum where people said that they used this more than the Nefertiti. This is a 1976 Mark I Fender Rhodes, and what that means is that this definitely has plastic hammers on it, and it definitely has a bit of that bark that we've come to think of as characteristic in those mid-70s Rhodes. It has an ability to bite a little bit, which is great because especially with the earlier Mark I Rhodes, you have felt hammers, which sound very beautiful, but really don't do much to cut through live. And so this one is extremely versatile from a live performance setting. Now I want to say something kind of controversial. I am not a big Fender Rhodes guy. There was a point, I think there's a point for everybody who plays keyboards, where they go, am I gonna get really into Fender Rhodes, right? We've all had that morning where we wake up and just Google it. And of course I was into the Doors like everybody else, and Riders on the Storm is probably, a lot of the reason I moved to LA as an adult, when as a child I was listening to that song, like, this song is amazing. Is this what California's like? A Wurlitzer has this ability to grow, right? You can treat it more like an acoustic piano. You can bark more with it. It cuts better. The mid-range is brighter. Whereas a Fender Rhodes competes in this register that I would almost say is more akin to what a jazz guitar does. And especially if you have a jazz guitarist on a gig, it can be a lot of frequencies that are competing, right? And especially in that 200 to 400 range on the Hertz spectrum. Like, that's really where you're gonna get a lot of boominess, and I find it can really build up quickly with this instrument. You could even get in the way of a bass player, for instance. I've had bassists tell me to stop using my left hand when I've been playing a Fender Rhodes because of how low-endy it is. But of course I recognize there's a time and a place to play a Fender Rhodes. I live in Los Angeles. There's plenty of fusion gigs. That's really the correct time to play a Fender Rhodes. I play plenty of R&B gigs. That's also the correct time to play a Fender Rhodes. You absolutely need to do it. It's non-negotiable for that genre. You can't play that with a Wurlitzer. It is made for Rhodes, it's made on Rhodes, and you gotta come to it with that mindset. So without too much more talking, I wanna kinda get just straight into the playing of it all. And let's do a little bit of a review at the piano. I thought we'd do just a couple playing examples. I'm gonna start with it pretty much just with reverb. I pretty much always use a reverb on these things, so I'm not even gonna bother playing it dry. You know what? I will play it dry, just for you. We'll play it dry. Here we go. Dry, it's cool. Dry is cool. It's all right. Let's add a little bit of compression if we're going to do it dry. 30, just the smallest amount. I have 1.3 of compression. I don't like playing these things dry, to be honest. I never play them dry. We are going to play this bone dry. We're going to use Autopan. I'm going to actually have it mapped to the pedal. So I'm going to click Control Pedal. I'm going to turn this from 0 to 10. And that way, when I go at 0 on this Yamaha control pedal, it'll just be dry like this. But then as I move up, I can actually push that panning in and out. It's like riding a mix knob. All right, so let's play with that for a little bit. That's quite nice. I'm actually going to turn on Dynacomp and turn off the regular compressor. Let's hear how that sounds. I like that better. I've used this sound on lo-fi quite a lot. You can pretty much ride out a pad for a really interesting amount of time on this, like this. It's obviously fantastic. I've said this, and I'll say it again, the Autopan should only be used if you know you're going to be doing a set, let's say on like a tour or something. You should not build Autopan into your patches generally, because most sound systems, especially small ones and especially stadiums, ironically, are actually summed to mono. And this is because they don't want it like cutting out as it's going on each different side of the room. So you're a lot better using tremolo in most cases. And tremolo, of course, just sounds like this. Still got to map to that pedal, but I really like tremolo. I use it a whole lot more than I use Autopan, because Autopan is really a studio effect, is how I'd talk about it. It needs to be in a controlled environment in order for it to have effect. And mostly, when I say controlled environment, I mean headphones. In fact, if you're listening out of your phone speaker, it might not have even sounded any different, because you're just hearing both sides being played out of a very small difference of area. It doesn't really have the ability to show you left and right at the rate that you would need it to in order for it to have its intended effect. So I recommend using tremolo. But let's turn off tremolo for a second and go to, of course, phaser. No Fender Rhodes discussion would be complete without a phaser. There are two on board of the Nord Stage 4. They have a replication of the Small Stone phaser, which is a 4-stage phaser that was made in 1974. If you click variation right here, it takes you to a biphase phaser. Not really sure what that model is. I really don't use that model. So we're going to keep it on Small Stone. What I would recommend doing is keeping a mount at 0. The Small Stone had a switch that was called color, and you could turn the switch on to get more color. But by color, I think they mean resonance, and I really, really don't like resonance in piano. So here's what it sounds like with the rate at about 6.5 and the amount at 0. To me, that's a phaser. I'm going to turn on some stage verb. This is so like wedding gig, you know what I mean? This is so like in like Step Brothers. This is like the sound that you'd hear at like the Catalina wine mixer. It's that like yacht rock sound almost. I tend to stay away from phasers, to be honest. I think they sound so dated, but they're really cool for, you know, I guess overdubs of things, especially if you're okay with leaning into a bit of cheese. I would also use it with a delay. So I got a ping pong delay set up, something like this I would do maybe on an overdub. Adds a nice bit of motion. I guess you could also use chorus for that. Something else I used to do on the electro quite a lot is use the vibrato. So I guess the vibrato, I think that's called a vibratone is what I'm not sure what pedal it's modeled off of. Maybe like the Univibe, I think it was called. I think it was called that. I'll check it later. But essentially, as it comes default on the Stage 4, you can see it actually says Vibe Stereo. It's a cool sound. Ooh, kind of like it with the delay. But I actually really like it mono. So I'll click variation to get to vibe mono, turn up the reverb a little bit, and then I'm gonna give it a pretty slow rate and a pretty heavy amount. Yeah. I'm also gonna turn on drive at about 2. I actually have a song out on Spotify where I am almost certainly not using this Rhodes, but using this exact effects set, and it's called Salzedo. It sounds like this. It's a very basic part, but it's very effective because of those effects. Let's play around a little more in the mid-range. off the mid-range switch here. It's obviously really, really nice. So we've kind of done a couple atmospheric things. Obviously that would be super, super busy in a mix. Let's talk about more how I'd actually use this out on a gig. So if I were going to use this for a jazz gig, I might have the drive somewhere around 2. I usually like it around there. I don't normally tend towards the stage verb. As I've said before, I just think it's versatile. I would keep the tremolo about to be on if it wasn't on. I would keep both things about up like this. You can see that's where I have them now. I find that gets to a pretty stock standard tremolo sound. It's nice that they made it like that you don't have to remember some weird settings. Like if you have them both facing straight up, you know, rate at 5, amount at 5, that's about right to what a Fender Rhodes, at least the ones that I've looked up on the internet, that's what they seem to be. But if I'm soloing, I'm actually never going to use tremolo at all. So let's just do stuff playing around without any tremolo on and just basically drive and verb. This just feel like making love. Let me go here. That's part of the reason I wouldn't use a tremolo while soloing, is if you gotta hit a stab, you kind of want it to work. But that's, isn't it weird that like Wynton Kelly style voicings when played on a Rhodes just sound like Herbie? You know what I mean? I mean, doesn't that sound? Herbie do that double diminish. I can't do it. I'm playing around too much. Let's play more. Put the Autopan back on. Slow rate. Let's do something with room verb. I'm going to play around with room verb and a little bit of drive. I have the touch on medium, which was formerly known as 2, and I still have the mid-range switch on, which I pretty much always leave on live. This might sound a little bit bright or kind of barky, but that's okay, because this is kind of what you need to cut through a mix, especially if you're running through like QSE, you know, K12s. It's actually good to have a little bit of extra treble in the mix. So here we go. I am surprised by how much this piano kind of falls apart in the low end. It's actually not a bad thing, especially from the perspective of I've had bassists ask me to stop playing Rhodes before with my left hand because it gets so up in their same register. But, you know, it's not a particularly strong low end. I mean, you're going to struggle if you're trying to... It's more plunk, isn't it? I mean, that's those plastic hammers that we were talking about before. You can hear the bass is not overwhelming. That's my heavy approximation. That's by no means transcribed, but I use this a lot. I love that. I mean, that's just so great, man, you know. Ray Manzarek, one of the best to ever do it. And keep the left-hand bass going the whole time. Now it's probably worth saying they had a real bassist in the studio doing that part, which is why this one doesn't sound as thick. And when they were using a Fender Rhodes bass live, they could EQ it totally separate from the Farfisia or more likely Vox Continental organ that they were using at the time when they were actually playing. So that's worth having said, right, is that this should sound a little bit thinner. But even so, it is quite... It's not overly dominant in the low end, especially when you compare it to something like the Nefertiti. Here's the Nefertiti. A lot more low end. Here's the EP9. It's more measured. Nefertiti. Just a lot of woofiness. Nefertiti. To me, it sounds a lot more like that recording than the Nefertiti does. And up until this point, the Nefertiti's kind of been the standard bearer. So it is impressive to see that they've like managed to, you know, branch out their piano lineup in such an impressive way. Let me try one more improvisation. I'm going to try to go more dry. I'm going to go with a room verb again. I'm going to turn off the Autopan. Maybe turn on just straight tremolo. Yeah. that's the EP9 from Nord. I think it's better than any of the offerings that come before it. Honorary shout out to EP2 Ideal Timbre. I really, really like this one as well. I find that it does a good job of being accessible in terms of frequency range, the way that the Stockholm does as well. I wouldn't use the Nefertiti anymore. It was the king for a minute, but I really do think this is the best option now if you only need one Rhodes on your board, which you don't only need one, but if you did, it'd be this one. Get it in the XL size. It is definitely worth it. And yeah, guys, until next time, keep letting me know what's working for you and keep playing.